What if I told you that the key to unlocking true freedom in your life was found in one word? That's forgiveness. And today we're diving into how forgiveness sets us free from bitterness, anger, and emotional baggage. You'll not only learn and understand the importance of forgiveness, but you'll also have the practical steps of how to walk in the freedom that God has for you. That's coming up in this video. But my name is Pastor Dan Chavez, and I am passionate about helping people follow Jesus and lead with purpose. So if you are new here, please consider subscribing. And if you find value in this content, help us reach other people for Jesus. Give this video a like. Have you ever asked yourself the question, how do I truly forgive? Why is forgiveness even so hard? If you've asked yourself those questions, well, this video is for you. And if we be honest about the subject here, forgiveness is more than just a word, okay? It is a powerful act. When we forgive someone, it unlocks emotional, mental, and spiritual freedom. So whether you've been hurt maybe by a close friend, or maybe you're struggling to forgive yourself for a past mistake, today we want to unfold how forgiveness can set you free. Because quite honestly, unforgiveness is kind of like this. Let me illustrate this. It's like carrying a heavy backpack, okay? And each hurt and each offense is like putting another rock inside this backpack that is just weighing us down. But I want to tell you the good news about this, okay? There is good news that God doesn't want you to carry the weight of unforgiveness any longer. There's a parable in Matthew 18 where Jesus shares a story of a servant who was forgiven this massive debt, yet he refused to forgive even the smallest debt to someone else. This parable is powerful because it teaches us why unforgiveness traps us and keeps us in a prison, and how forgiveness is the key to freedom. So let's go ahead and just explore this parable. I want to share 3 powerful takeaways here about forgiveness that will change the way you live. The first thing I want to point out is that God's forgiveness is bigger than we think. The first thing we need to understand about God's forgiveness is that it is bigger than we can imagine. God's forgiveness is bigger than we have the capacity to understand. In this parable, the servant owed this king an impossible debt. You would just imagine it like $1 billion in today's term. And instead of the king just throwing him into prison, the king, he forgave it all. He wiped the slate clean and forgave the servant's debt. This is a picture of what God does for us. You see, and every time that we sin, it's like adding a rock to that backpack that's weighing us down, and we're adding to our debt with God. But here is the beautiful part about the gospel, that God sent Jesus to pay that debt for us when he died on the cross. And it doesn't matter what we've experienced, what we've gone through, what mistakes we might have made in our past. We have to understand that God's forgiveness is bigger. God's grace is bigger. So just imagine this, having a $1 million credit card bill that you just cannot pay. There's no possible way that you have the means to pay this. And suddenly you meet someone who pays the entire debt off. Just like that. You owe not a penny more. That, my friend, is exactly what Jesus did for us on the cross. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." we were created new in Christ to do good works, but often what gets in the way of us just walking in the purpose that God has for us, doing the good works that God prepared for us long ago to do, is unforgiveness. It stands in our way. It weighs us down from becoming the people God created us to be. Have you heard of a lady named Corrie ten Boom? Let me tell you about her. After surviving a Nazi concentration camp, she is faced with a Nazi guard who asks her for forgiveness. Like in that moment, she has a choice to make, okay? She can hold on to the anger. She can hold on to the injustice. She can hold on to the mistreatment that happened to her in that concentration camp. Or she could forgive like Jesus had forgiven her. Do you know what she chose? Corrie chose to forgive. And let me tell you, that decision set her free. So you may be asking the question, how do I forgive somebody who hurt me so deeply? The answer to that, my friend, is to start by remembering how much God has forgiven you. You see, His grace empowers us to release the debt that others owe us. The second thing I want to point out is that forgiven people must forgive others. In this parable, after being forgiven a huge debt, the servant refuses. He refuses to forgive someone just a little debt. And Jesus, in this parable, He's trying to make a point. If we've been forgiven so much, if we've been forgiven an enormous debt, how can we not forgive others? I can tell you that the world teaches us different from what Jesus is teaching us in this parable. The world teaches us to hold on to anger. The world teaches us to keep grudges against those people that have hurt us. The world teaches us to seek revenge instead of releasing those feelings through forgiveness. But you know what? The Bible teaches us in Romans 12:2. It says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." We are not to live like the world lives. See, because we often hold on to these small offenses. Maybe somebody who ignored us or spread a rumor or hurt us in some kind of way, and it just bogs us down. It traps us. Yet, in the light of forgiveness that God has shown us, we're called to forgive others, aren't we? This is what Jesus is teaching us. Because when we hold on to grudges, we're acting just like that unmerciful servant. I want you to think about this. Think about your favorite football team, okay? And you have a couple of key players that you love on that team. The team is doing great in their season, and it's all because they're working together. There is a unity. But all of a sudden, there's a little rivalry. There's a little disagreement. And there's a fight between those two players that you really like. And that starts causing a tension between the team, and that starts destroying the unity in the team. They start losing games. But finally, they come to terms. They work things out, and they forgive each other. And the team starts winning again. You see, unforgiveness doesn't just weigh us down. It affects everyone around us. Have you ever asked yourself the question, why should I forgive others? You see, forgiveness isn't just about releasing others. It's about releasing yourself from the emotional prison of bitterness. It's for you. It not only releases others, but it releases you. The third thing I want to point out is that forgiveness sets you free. See, at the end of this parable, the unforgiving servant is thrown into prison. And what Jesus is trying to illustrate here in this parable is that when we don't forgive, we're the ones that get trapped. We are putting ourselves in a prison because of unforgiveness. Imagine that, being locked in a prison of bitterness, constantly just replaying the hurt over and over. See, let me tell you a story about someone who I know who carried bitterness for so long. All of their life almost, they carried a bitterness towards their dad because he abandoned their family. Just holding on to that anger. It didn't hurt the dad. It hurt them. And it wasn't until this person came to Jesus and finally forgave that they were able to feel this weight of unforgiveness being lifted off their life. And that is the power of unforgiveness. It releases you from your past. You remember that heavy backpack filled with rocks we talked about just a moment ago? Every time we forgive, it's like taking one of those rocks out and tossing it aside. And taking another rock when we let go of unforgiveness and tossing it aside. And when we forgive, we're the ones who become lighter. We're the ones who experience freedom. So if you're asking that question, what happens when you forgive someone? Forgiveness leads to healing in our lives. It allows us to experience both emotional freedom and peace. And when we forgive, we are releasing ourselves from the weight of bitterness. Is there someone in your life who you need to forgive? Maybe it's a friend who hurt you, or a family member who let you down, and you are holding on to this unforgiveness because of the pain that you've experienced. Maybe the person you're having trouble forgiving is yourself. I want to encourage you today, don't carry that heavy backpack of unforgiveness any longer. Jesus wants to set you free of that, and that happens through forgiving others in the same way He forgave us. Take it off, forgive, and walk in the freedom that comes through living a life in Christ, being forgiven and forgiving others. Ephesians 4:32 says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." My friend, if this video helped you, and if you know someone who needs to hear this message, hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this with a friend. And remember, God's forgiveness is key to true freedom. Let's walk together in it. My name is Pastor Dan Chavez, and if you have any questions or you need prayer, go ahead and feel free to comment below. I would love to connect with you. And until next time, lead with purpose.